Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super delighted to be here. Yeah, and today I'm going to share a little bit of my journey from academia to industry. As Anna mentioned, I'm a cell biologist, and I pretty much dedicated my training career as to basic research on parasites. And I transitioned to industry back in 2019, and I want to share a little bit of my journey. My talk was designed to raise questions. So if you have questions, please don't be shy and share your questions with us. I will start with an outline and a disclaimer. So I will talk a little bit about my timeline, and the bulk of my talk will be dedicated to how was my journey for career exploration, how was my job application process, what are the skills that were transferable skills from academia to industry, and how is my day-to-day on an industry setup. I hope with this information, I hope this information is also useful for you if you are considering transition to careers outside of academia. As a disclaimer, all those informations are based on my personal perspective from an academic research in Brazil to an academic research in the US, transitioning to biotechnology industry in the US. I do think that the way that biotech industry works in the US is mirrored in other countries. So I think all this information can be useful for many of you, but that's a disclaiming in how these perspectives are shaping and how in the perspective that I'm going to share today. Can you go to the next slide? So I will start with a timeline. I was born and raised in Brazil, and all my training was done in Brazil. I have a college degree in biomedical science. I was in Rio de Janeiro for most of my career, for my training, and for Brazil has some peculiarities that helped me to build experience early on. So during the college, we have space on our schedule to actually do real research and be in the lab and publish papers and be trained as an skilled research. And I did that back in 2006. Since I started college, I joined the lab and I started to learn more about science. So when I finished college, I was actually read and enrolled in the master's program. So grad school in Brazil is a little bit different from in the US, for example. We started with a master's program and then a PhD program if we wish to. So I was in grad school from 2009 to 2015. And my research was focused on cell biology of host pathogen interactions. I joined lab that specializes in microscopy tools, and I learned a lot of microscope techniques to understand host pathogens interaction. When I finished my PhD, I ventured out in a postdoc at UC Davis in California. And I was there until 2019, where I started to transition to industry and I joined Agilent, where I've been since then. As Anna mentioned, at Agilent, I'm a scientist at the molecular and cell biology group at Agilent Labs, and I'll talk a little bit of each of these steps during my talk. Can you go to the next slide? So how everything started? It started when I was in college, super young, and I fell in love with a parasite called Toxoplasma gondii. This is the parasite that you are seeing. This banana-shaped parasite is super cute, and besides being super beautiful, it causes an endemic disease in Brazil called toxoplasmosis. The lab that I joined was really focused on understanding pathogens that causes diseases that are important for the Brazil and South America in general. And one of those parasites is Toxoplasma gondii. So I joined a group that was really focused on applying electron microscope tools to understand how this parasite survive in a host cell and how this parasite evade the immune system, for example. So I started to work and present research work very early on, and you can see in the picture from 2017 how we presented poster back then, just printing out from a PowerPoint. Can you go to the next slide? So after finishing college, I kept working with the same cute parasite that I was in love with. I published a couple of papers, and in 2016, I joined UC Davis as a postdoc. My decision to venture out from Brazil was to learn new techniques and to be exposed to different kinds of techniques that I was not able to while doing research in a cell biology lab. And my goal was to learn more about gene editing. At that time, several groups that worked with Toxoplasma were starting to implement CRISPR-Cas9 for gene editing. And I joined a group that was trying to implement CRISPR-Cas9 for not just single gene editing, but also whole genome screen. And I really wanted to learn more of the techniques, how I could analyze data and then publish in the area as well. So that was my goal as I started my postdoc back in 2016. Can you go to the next slide? And everything seemed fine. I knew that to get a position as an academic professor, I would need to be a postdoc for about 5 years. I knew that I need certain publications to be competitive for a job in academia. And my main goal was to return to Brazil and become a professor in Brazil. Then I got lost. The more that I was exposed to the life of a researcher or a PI, the less I was seeing myself as a PI or as a group leader. So I started to question myself, what would be the other routes that I could take to still do what I love, which is research, and not being a group leader in academia. And to start this conversation about what are the other professions that I could have, I joined some career exploration programs. Several universities out there host career exploration programs. They are free, and if your university doesn't have one, I would start saying that you can look for free programs in other big universities out there. They have a lot of resources on their website, and you can start to look for free resource out there. Another free resource that I recommend is my IDP, where it's basically a match of your interests with different career options. So from time to time, you fill out a lot of questions in a questionnaire, and then you're going to get directions in how you can reach your goals of careers outside of academia. So I think that's a great resource. But the career exploration programs do help you to understand what are the careers that are outside of academia that can be suitable for whoever has a PhD or is in a postdoc training position. It really encourages you to build a resume and LinkedIn that is interesting for industry, teach you how to promote yourself and to translate your academic skills to an industry setup. And the other training that I did that was really valuable was business school trainings. Business schools are generally interested in educating people that are not in the business area how industry work in general. And I did a specific training for PhD and postdocs, and it really helped me with the language that the industry understands. Can you go to the next slide, please? During the career exploration, I really took the time to understand what do I want to do if I leave academia. And those are the questions that I asked myself. Do I like to bench work? Do I enjoy writing grants? Do I like mentoring? Am I willing to work with animals or not? Am I excited about different research topics that are not the research topics that I'm working on? If yes, what are those research topics that are out there that I really want to learn more? Do I enjoy and present my work? Or what are the things that I dislike about my current position as a postdoc? And it really took me time to figure out what do I want to do after leaving academia. And with that, I did understood that that I want to be a research outside of academia. I love bench work. I have a lot of experience, and I actually feel challenged being at the bench, developing new protocols, troubleshooting protocols that are out there, and obtaining results and also sharing the results with the rest of the group. So I see myself as a cell biologist with a lot of experience in cell analysis tools. I was exposed during my training to all those tools related to cell and molecular biology, and I think those would be valuable for industry in general. Can you go to the next slide, please? But then there was a gap. I knew myself. At that point, I knew myself. I knew that I really enjoy looking at cells or analyzing cells in several ways and transforming that in biological relevant information. So how I can be a part of this puzzle where industry is looking for somebody with this profile and I have this profile. How I can show a recruiter or a hiring manager that I have all these skill sets that can be valuable in an industry setup. So I started to make lists, and that's one of my advices. List all your expertises, skill sets, techniques that you are really an expert, or techniques that you are familiar, but you are not as an expert. The fluence that you have in certain softwares, number of grants, number of trainees, publications, patents, media press, even if it's a super tiny media press in your local university newspaper, that matters. Conference presentation, everything that you can list and transforming numbers will be useful to build a resume in the future. But if you remember my timeline, I started to do research back in 2006, and now I was in 2019, which means that I have 13 years of lists to do. So my advice is to every year you set up a couple of hours, one afternoon, just to make a list of all the progress that you have, all the achievements that you had on that year. That will make your life really easier. And that list doesn't need to be, the list will change over time. And this list is really important because during the job application, you are not going to tell to the recruiter everything that you ever done on your life. So you have to tailor your abilities to the job description that you are applying for. So those lists are really valuable for you to quickly transform that in a resume for specific for a job application. Can you go to the next slide? Another difficulty that I had was looking at my soft skills. And soft skills are really important when you join an industry setup. That's the way that a hiring manager or a recruiter understands if you're going to be a good fit for the team. Besides the technical skills, you do have to have some match with the team members that are already there. And it was difficult to me to translate everything that I've been done in a lab for 13 years to qualifications that would be interesting to industry. So as an academic, we do work with tight deadlines. Most of the time we are working in more than one project, and this is really, really valuable. We are able to document and report data all the time to several people, to different audience. That's also valuable. We need to be creative. It's not every day that the lab has a lot of funding. Many times we have to be creative to make sure that we move forward with our research in a diverse situations. We do work in multidisciplinary teams. Most of us would have or will have or already have a collaborator or a shared PI, or you go to another lab to do part of your research. That's a multidisciplinary team, and that's a skill that is really valuable. Most of the time, most of PhDs and postdocs are also able to work independently. No one is really telling you what to do and how to do. And this is how we work independent. Each of us is able to manage projects, and this is project management skills. We know, our deadlines, what are the experiments that needs to get done, when the data needs to be presented, when it's time to change to a new goal. So those are all project management skills. And we all have people management skills as well. We train new students in the lab or new technicians. We work together with core facility members that are in general not familiar with our research, and those are all people management skills. And laboratory management, we all have to buy reagents, plan experiments, understand what is the stocks. In some labs, some students are responsible for stocking up and checking stocks for certain reagents, tissue culture rooms, and so on. So those are all laboratory management skills. And took me a fair amount of time to put that together as a soft skill list that is good to have. And we cannot take those skills for granted. We need to highlight these skills. I had a hard time highlighting those skills because for me, it was really normal to do all these, and I don't need to really highlight that. But in industry, your hiring manager or the recruiter needs to know what you are able to do, and you have to highlight all those simple things that you do every day in a laboratory setup. So at that step, I knew myself, I listed my skills, technical skills and soft skills. And now I need to understand the other part of the puzzle, what the industry is looking for, what are the companies that I really feel that I could work with, that I would feel fulfilled professionally if I work for that company. And one great resource that I'm sure that most of you are aware is LinkedIn. Have an up-to-date LinkedIn. There are a lot of trainings out there to maximize your usage of LinkedIn, and it's an awesome tool to find jobs, understand what are the jobs that are opening, and also understanding how several companies operate. Most of the companies will have a LinkedIn page, and in there you can find the mission of the company, the jobs that they have opening, the size of the company that matters a lot, and several other informations related to that company. So it's a great tool for you to make a list of companies that you wish you could work with. And that helps you to track if that specific company opens a job that could be interesting for you. Another resource that I used a lot, and actually was how I came to know about the job that I applied, is informational interview. Building a network with people that is working in a setup that you wish to work it's important and super valuable. And one way to do that is approaching those researchers and asking for an informational interview. And an informational interview is pretty much a talk. It's a 15-minute phone call where you ask 2 to 3 questions and let the person talk about their job. What I was super shy to do that. I'm not an English native speaker. I'm super shy to talk in the phone. But what I learned through the process is that everyone likes to share their experience. Everyone is willing to give you 15 minutes of their day to talk about their career experience, if that's helpful to you. One of the career exploration programs that I was part with, they asked us to do 3 informational interviews with UC Davis alumni. So I had to choose from I would say a list of 50 alumni that overlapped with my career. I had to choose three of them and talk for 15 minutes or so. The first person that I talked is actually my manager now. And I was curious about her skill sets because it's really similar to my skill sets, and I wanted to understand how she could apply that at Agilent. At that point, I didn't know Agilent had a cellular analysis portfolio. I had never used any Agilent instruments at that point. I only knew Agilent for their mass spec portfolio, which was not my expertise. And through the information interview, I came to learn that Agilent had a cellular analysis portfolio with microscopes, flow cytometry, and so on. Um, and she mentioned that they had some job openings. And from there, from that informational interview, I looked for the job openings and I did see a fit with the position that I'm currently in. And that helped me, one, to know the company, know how the company worked, to know about the job opening. And she actually gave me a referral. I will talk a little bit more about referrals later, but those are also important. The other exposure that helped me to understand, can you return to the first? Thank you. The other exposure that helped me to understand how industry works and what industry wants was career fairs. Um, Career fairs, it's a great opportunity for you to get to know each of the companies. They will be all at the same place. During the career fair, you have a recruiter with all the positions that are opening at the time, and you do have some people from the company that go to the career fair to talk about the company. So it's a great way to learn about your favorite companies and learn about the positions that are opening at that time and understand how the company really works. It's usually free. You don't need to interview if you don't want. You don't need to talk with anyone if you don't want. But it's a great opportunity to be exposed to industry and understand what they really want. And then the next slide. Now I started to put all the pieces together. So I knew myself, I knew all my skill sets, and I knew what industry wanted at that time. Um, so I started to set some work time apart to work on my next step. And I will highlight that more than once. PhD and postdocs are training positions. You are expected to know your next step by the end of your training program. Set up work week time to work on your next step, building a resume, knowing what you want to do later takes time, and you need to be awake, you need to be attentive in what you are doing. Set some time off in your work week. I knew from a fact for myself that I only had 2 hours per week to do that. So I decided to apply for one job a week because I would use that 2 hours to build my resume, tailor my resume specific for that job opening, and write a cover letter. So the resume is really your chance to showcase your expertise, but the reality is that HRs and recruiters are super, super busy, as hiring managers are also super busy. And no one has really a lot of time to go through your resume and do a deep research on your profile. So your goal should be one, maximum 2 pages to showcase yourself. And keep in mind that everyone will only spend a few minutes in each of the applications. And I'm saying that from the other side perspective. I've been involved in hiring. I've been part of hiring committees, and I've been on that shoes of only having few minutes to go through the applications. And if the information that I needed was not there, the candidate would be great, but I didn't have the time to do more research on that. So keep that in mind if you are writing a resume. One way to do that and to get attention from recruiters and hiring managers is using words that are in the job description. So, for example, if the job description says we need somebody that works in flow cytometry and you have flow cytometry experience, you have to put that on your resume. In the first top of your resume, I am expert in flow cytometry. So that's just like an example in how simple it can be to showcase the expertise that you have. And my last advice is if you know somebody at the company that you are applying, ask for referral. Referral is not a favor. Referral is actually financially compensated if you are hired. It's a great way to start a network in a company that you want to work and really expedite the process. I was referred by my colleague to Agilent. She was working at Agilent, and I submitted my application on Monday. Tuesday, the recruiter was calling me. So that really expedited the process. And most of the people is willing to give referrals, not because the person is just interested in money, just because we all know how hard and expensive it's to hire somebody. When somebody is a great fit and the process is going to be fast, it's good for everyone. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you so much. So after building your resume, applying for jobs, application process can take time. As I mentioned before, HRs are busy. They are hiring for the home company. The bigger the company, more complicated it is HR, more time is going to take to get response from HR. But I want to dive a little bit deeper in how the interview process is for PhD level position in an RD setup, which is the setup that I mean. So it all starts with a phone screen. So the recruiter calls you, and it really is a fact check of your resume. They want to understand if you are who you were saying that you are in your resume, and if that skill set fits the skill set of your of the job opening, the job requisition. The recruiter is usually not an expert on your area. It's not really familiar with the language. So it's a quick call just to see if you should move to the next step. The next step is also a phone interview with your hiring manager. The hiring manager is usually your future manager. And that's a more technical interview. The hiring manager will dive deeper in your technical expertise and will try to probe you to understand if you're going to be a good fit for the team. So we would expect some soft skill questions as well, because the hiring manager wants to make sure that you will be a good fit for the team. And then the third step of the interview, it's a whole day process when you start with a job talk, and then you have one-to-one with members of the team that you will be probably working. The job talk is where you have time to showcase all your expertise that matches the job description. For the job talk, the scientific relevance sometimes doesn't matter much. What matters is if what you are doing matches the job description. Of course, if you develop a technology that is really important for that company, then the relevance will change, and you have to highlight that. So the job talk, again, needs to be tailored for each of the jobs that you are applying. I don't think it's worth to have a scaffold job talk that you are going to change over time, just because the job descriptions do change a lot. So you will need to make a new presentation every time that you go through the process. Another aspect that is important for the whole day of interview, the third step of interviews, is researching about the company, understanding their mission, their product portfolio before the interview, because you are going to be asked about, you're going to be probed about that. And it really shows that you did your homework of understanding how the company operates. Of course, that you don't get as much information as you get when you are working at the company, but there are a lot of information in company's website that will help you to shape responses. You should prepare for all those steps, and you should have lists of questions to ask. Interview is a two-way process. You are interviewing you are being interviewed by the company, but you are also interviewing the company. You are expected to ask questions. Ask questions about future benefits, ask questions about work dynamics, ask questions about managing styles. So come prepared for the interview with a list of questions and be curious about the process in general. And when everything goes well, the process ends with a job offer, and then it's time for negotiation. At least in the US, you're expected to negotiate your salary, your starting date, benefits. And the starting date in here for us that are moving from academia to industry is really crucial because this will allow you to wrap up your postdoc or PhD and then start in the new position. Can you go to the next slide? And then it comes the time to talk with your supervisor. And that is a really crucial part of finishing a training and starting a new position. Communicate your career plan as soon as possible. For me, being clear about what you're going to get done before you leave, being clear about your availability, if any, after moving to a new job. You are not obligated to be available, but you can be if you want to be. Ask for feedback. And one process that I had to go through, and I think most of us have to go through, is educating your mentor on timelines and job applications. It's not every PI that will understand how a job application in industry looks like, how long does it take to apply for a job, and how much time you have left when you sign a job offer. So all those information, if you educate your PI, the process will be more smooth and easier for both sides. If everyone knows what to expect, it's easy to handle any adversity that can happen. So be clear, be generous with your time, especially if you are moving countries, states, cities. Just be generous, understanding that transitions are tough for everyone, and you will need more time to do things that you are used to do. Another advice that I keep in mind for myself and for the mentees is that academic research is not really designed to end. So you're not going to finish that next paper, that next review. It's not really designed to end. But your training is supposed to end at one point. So if you get a job that you really want, you have to finish your training and move to the next step. Can you move to the next slide? Thank you. So how is my day working for a biotech company? So I will talk a little bit of the information that I can share about the work that I do and how my day-to-day look like at Agilent. So Agilent is a measurement company, and we have a super big portfolio with several instruments that are dedicated to measuring. It can be measuring proteins in a mass spec, for example. It can be measuring cells in a plate reader. It can be measuring cells in a flow cytometry. I work for a division called Agilent Labs. Having a research lab inside a technology company was something that happened a lot in the 70s. And most of the companies got rid of their research labs over time, which did not happen for Agilent. Agilent kept their research labs. And Agilent Labs is responsible for high risk, high reward type of research. So we are usually testing super cool technologies, and we are usually failing a lot. Most of our projects started with really high expectations, and we fail in a year. And that's fine. We have a strong collaboration with academia. Academia is the place that takes more risk and explore research topics that industry sometimes doesn't have the time to do. We do have a lot of freedom of choice in the topics that we want to work, of course, among the business interests. Um, I work with a super creative and a multidisciplinary team, a few biologists, chemists, physicists, engineers, a lot of engineers. And I get to apply my cell biology knowledge to develop. So I help Agilent to either maximize the products that they already have, or to build or to create new products. Can you go to the next slide? And several aspects of joining biotech surprised me. First, I had a very high bar in how I would excel in industry. And my advice is allow yourself time to be familiar with the new work dynamics. Everything will be new. You are not going to be productive from day one, and that's expected. You are expected to just try to find yourself at the company before being productive. And success will be measured completely differently. As I mentioned in the past slide, we fail a lot. I do high risk, high reward kind of projects. When it's successful, it's really successful. When it's not, we just fail a lot. So we cannot measure our progress based in if a project is giving good results or not. So patent is a nice way to measure success. It means that we are being innovative, that we are understanding what is in the market out there and trying to break through that that technology. And one of the most important ways to measure success is business impact. If you collaborate with a group that is having a hard time trying to analyze one specific type of cell, and that is going to help a super important customer for the company. That is a super high impact in the business, right? If you make a customer that is important for the company, use your instrument, you're making a high impact, and that is really valuable for the company. How much internal and external collaborations you handle is also a way to measure success. And the last of the list would be conference presentations and papers. We really don't measure our success by papers. We do get a chance to publish, but it's not the way that we measure how successful we are. Work-life balance usually is great in industry, especially for bigger companies. So I'm respected. My manager respects my time outside of work. I'm not obligated to answer emails during the night or in the weekends or during my vacation time. The financial compensation is a perk in industry. PhD level positions are fairly compensated in industry. All the achievements are recognized either by promotion or by financial compensation. So if you submit a patent, you are going to be compensated. If you impact a business in a relevant way, you are going to be compensated, and so on. There is a space for professional development. There is a space if you want to learn more about the business, and I was surprised by that. And there is a space for you to learn new research skills. So for example, if I'm not a mass spec specialist, but if I do want to join a mass spec project, my management team will give me time to learn the technique before giving results and understanding what is going on. So there is time available for you to learn new skills all the time, and that surprised me a lot. Can you go to the next slide? And with that, I would like to finish my talk reinforcing that networking is key for you to succeed outside of academia, and start here, start now. If you want to talk more and if you keep thinking about the talk and you want to communicate with me, add me to your LinkedIn network or email me. My personal email is here. And have friends. I just put these pictures here to remember you to keep your friends, to spend time with your friends. They are your network as well. They are the easiest and most friendly network that you ever have. So have fun during the process. And the next slide. The next slide is just to thank you for your attention. And if you have questions, I'm really willing to answer all the questions.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. Yeah, the talk was really great with a lot of information. I'm sure the attendees might have related to some of your experience. And yeah, so before we open to questions, I would just like you to draw your attention to the chat. We'll add the link to a feedback form. So if you can answer the feedback form, it will help us for future events. So now we will open for questions. So again, if you prefer to raise your hands, I will call upon your name and you can ask the question yourself, or if you prefer, you can type the question into the chat. And while we wait for the first question to come, I have one question, to be honest, Tati. You mentioned things that surprised you when you moved to industry, but you mostly mentioned things that you kind of enjoy. It was good in a way. So I think my question is, what were the main challenges that you experienced during this transition?
One challenging was to understand how I would measure success and how I would ask for feedback. That is a little bit different in industry. So it took me some time to understand how the dynamics works. And the other part that I still don't like until today is, maybe the proper word is not lack of freedom, but everything has a compliance. For example, I want to use a specific cell type. That cell type is licensed from a hospital. My company won't have us access to that cell because that cell is not available for commercial use. Even though I'm doing research, I'm at a company, I cannot have access to that cell. So that's one aspect. Another example that really takes time to just understand and move around. We are going to a conference and we have to prepare a talk for that conference. I cannot use any picture that I find in the internet. I have to go through an official image library and make sure that I'm using the images that Agilent allows me to use. So everything would take way more time to get done, and there is less freedom. It's not less freedom, there is more compliance when we are buying reagents, when we are sourcing things from an academic group. There is a lot of compliance to actually do one simple experiment. But also there is more time to work to obtain results. So if my manager knows that this one specific project will have a lot of compliance, we'll have more time to finish the goal of that project. But that's one aspect that took me some time to understand and to move around as well.
That's interesting, yeah. And another question, since we wait for more questions to come, is, can you describe one day at work? How would it look like?
Yeah, I forgot to talk about that. Sorry, thank you for reminding me. Yeah, my day, I usually spend 70% of my time at the bench. I have 5 research projects running at the same time, so I split my week between experimental goals that I want to fulfill for each of the projects. So I spend 70% of my time at the bench doing experiments. I'll talk a little bit more how an experiment looks like in a bit. And I spend 40% of my time, 30 to 40% of my time doing desk work, so communicating with business partners, communicating with academic parties, or sharing data with my team. So that's how my work week look like. How an experimental setup look like for high risk, high reward kind of research. I'm usually testing super crazy prototypes that are designed by the engineers. So it's a really rough format of what a product will look like in the future, and we do need to understand feasibility. So let's say that somebody invented a plate, and I have to see if the cells would stick to the plate. I need to see if the cells would survive on that specific plate. I need to see if I can count those cells in the microscope and things like that. So I'm usually testing a lot of prototypes for the team and giving my cell biology expertise for that given device. So most of the time I'm telling them, look, the cells are dying, we cannot use these, or this is really great for the cells, we should move forward, and so on and so forth.
So if you think about, it's a lot of communication with other people from other fields that you need to explain the basics as well. Is that right?
Yes. I spend a huge part of my time explaining basic biology concepts for engineers and physicists. How a live cell looks like, how a dead cell looks like, and super basic concepts. I spend part of my time communicating with them and helping them to understand what is going on in the bench.
Interesting. Oh, there's a question into the chat. Thank you. Interesting question. Do you miss anything about academia, especially in comparison to what you imagine a PI in academia would do?
No. Short answer is no. I don't miss academia. I enjoy the research that I'm doing. One of my fears when I moved from academia to industry was not being challenged. And I do feel challenged every day. I have chance to learn new things every day in the industry setup that I'm in. So I don't miss academia in any way. I actually feel more fulfilled professionally being in industry than I was in academia. I feel rewarded for the achievements that I have. I'm able to see my achievements over time. So I don't miss academia.
Interesting. Yeah, I say thanks so much for the great presentation. Yeah, it was really great, Tati. So I'll wait a few more minutes to see if there is any other questions. I might have one more for you. What are the common position names when you were looking for jobs? I know that it varies depending on the country a lot, but would you say be senior scientists, researchers? How is the name for the job?
Yeah, it changes between industry sectors in general, and it changes between countries. But I would say that usually research assistants are positions for master's level and college degree level. And then scientists are positions for PhD level. For senior scientist positions, you are expected to have more industry experience. So it's not really suitable for somebody that is moving from academia to industry. So pretty much researcher or scientists are the positions that you will be looking for in a PhD level.
Thank you. Yeah, so just waiting a few more seconds to see if any other questions will come up while we wait a little bit. So just reminding you again, if you can please fill out the feedback form, will help us with future events. And oh yeah, one more question now. What about changing the field from the one you did during the PhD? So you kind of
areas. I moved away from I move away from host pathogen interaction, and I mentioned that I worked with the same parasite and the same model for my whole academic training for 13 years actually. And I did love to work with Toxoplasma. That's one aspect that I miss, looking at Toxoplasma every day. Um, but I do get to apply all my cell biology training that I learned from Toxoplasma as a model organism to other cell types. Um, so it was a change to do not work with host pathogen interaction, but I keep working with cell biology aspects of cell analysis. So it is a change, but it is a change of model, but not a change of concept. Uh, so it was fine for me to do not work with host pathogen interaction. But I moved to industry in 2019. 5 months later, the pandemic started. 7 months later, the pandemic started, and everyone started to work with host pathogen interaction. Not exactly, parasites, but I got a chance to work with virus because everyone was trying to understand what SARS-CoV-2 was doing. So I used my host pathogen interaction, thanks to the pandemic skills, to this job as well.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, more questions coming. So, is any statistical experience programming also needed to get a job into industry?
Yeah. Um, so the department that I work on, so Agilent Labs, we do have a bioinformatics mini department inside the company that does all programming and statistical analysis. If you do have that on your portfolio and you're also a cell biologist, that is great. It's a super relevant skill, and actually gives you more chance to get a job. So yes, it is important, it is relevant, and many companies do need somebody with statistic experience and also programming experience. The more data that we're generating, I think it's really important to have some programming skills, because we are dealing with way more data that we were dealing before. So yes, it is important and relevant.
So you would advise someone to, if they have these skills, to continue developing, but if they don't have the skill, do you think it's something that will not get them hired, let's say?
Yeah, if you don't have the skill, I don't think that is going to exclude you to find a job in industry. But if you do have the skill, I think you'll get more chances to find a job in industry.
Perfect, thank you. One more, if you want to transition from academia to industry, is there any point at which you would recommend to do it? After PhD, postdoc, and when is too late?
It's never too late to move to industry. I worked with somebody that was actually a professor, and she decided to transition from academia to industry. So it's never too late to transition to industry. There's not really an age limit or how long you were a PhD before moving to industry. That is not a problem. I would say that a postdoc gives you exposure to more techniques and gives you time to really shape your career and understand yourself after a PhD. For the hiring process that I was involved in, what I gauged from the interview, we did interview people that was coming out of the PhD, and we interviewed people that was coming out of a postdoc. And I did see a shift in how mature a postdoc applying for a job in industry was compared with a PhD student applying for a job in industry. There are cases, so the positions are open for PhD level. So if you have a PhD, you can apply for the position. Some people will be hired, some people won't be hired. And the difference that I saw when I was interviewing was in how mature the person was for that job. But that will vary between company to company. It will also, your trajectory will implicating the process. So maybe you were super mature, you did a long PhD training, and you're ready to move to industry. So I would not say you should do a postdoc or you shouldn't do a postdoc. I think you need to go case by case.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. So I will wait one more question then. Are there any skills that are must needed to develop during a PhD or a postdoc to be more attractive to industry recruiter?
I would say that exposing yourself for several research techniques and research topics that you are really interested in, and also not just exposing, but being super hands-on and understanding the principles behind the techniques that you are working with. I think that is really helpful for an industry setup.
Thank you. And then just one question about your company specifically, Tatiana. Agilent has laboratories in different countries. Is that right?
Yes, Agilent has a site. The headquarters is here in California, but Agilent has sites in Europe, in China, in Brazil. I think it's pretty much it. And some of the factories are in different sites. So we have part of the factories that are in China, part of the factories are here in California, some in Europe, some in Australia as well. So it's spread around. Part of the R&D and the work, the high risk, high reward work tends to be done in the headquarters that is here in California, but there is R&D done in all the sites, pretty much.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So yeah, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending today. We hope that this talk was useful to you. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.